This is a video record of our trip to England from July 28th to August 10th, 2005. This is part 3. The highlights of this part include shopping at the giant swap meet at Portobello Road, visiting Covent Garden, soaking up art history at the National Gallery, taking a guided tour of Windsor Castle, and enjoying a pre-recorded audio tour of Westminster Abbey. Saturday, August 6th was going to be another full day of sightseeing in London. We had just finished 2 days of London sightseeing and 1 day at Cambridge outside London. We woke up at 6 a.m. and had an egg-free breakfast. We decided to start the day with a visit to the giant weekly swap meet called Portobello Road, aka Portobello Market. Before we left, I asked the concierge for directions. He said to walk to our nearest subway station, St. James Park, and take the subway to the Ladbroke Grove station. We arrived there at about 7:30 that morning. During the week, the shops and restaurants along this stretch of Portobello Road are like any other in London. Then every Saturday and Sunday, the sidewalks and streets of Portobello become a junk lover's paradise. The amounts and types of items for sale was mind-boggling. Like the song from the movie Bedknobs and Broomsticks says, "It's a street where the riches of ages are stowed. Anything and everything a chap can unload is sold off the borough in Portobello Road." I knew that anything I bought had to fit into my suitcase, so I only bought this book and an old 78 RPM record originally made and sold in England. Robin bought a small box with golden retrievers on it. A few of the shops along Portobello sell swap meet junk all week. Probably the most famous of these is called Alice's. After we finished at Portobello Road, we jumped on the subway and got off at the Covent Garden station. Covent Garden is a collection of specialty shops and restaurants crammed into this building. In one section, they sell things a la Portobello Road. In another section, there are very nice restaurants and novelty shops. During the summer, they even have a small carousel for children. Robin loved the shops and ended up getting this sign-matted photograph of the changing of the guard. About midway to our next destination, we passed by this restaurant and its attached bar. Robin was so taken by all the flowers that she asked me to take this picture of her sitting outside the bar. Our next destination was this 800-year-old church called St. Martin in the Fields. I had wanted to see the church because of its connection to the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields Orchestra. As we walked around admiring the interior of the church, we noticed this sign advertising a cafe in the crypt under the church. We had already had lunch at the Covent Garden, so we walked downstairs to the cafe and had scones and clotted cream as a snack. St. Martin is directly across the street from Trafalgar Square, an homage to Admiral Nelson, the British naval commander who defeated Napoleon's fleet at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. In the front of Trafalgar Square is this column with a statue of Nelson on its top. Here is a close-up of that statue. Notice his right arm. He lost it in a battle a few years before Trafalgar. As we walked around, I got this picture of Robin with St. Martin Church behind her. At the north end of Trafalgar Square was the British National Art Gallery. We would visit the gallery in a couple of days. When we returned to our hotel, Robin's legs and feet were throbbing as a result of all the walking we had done that day. She rested while I took a shower, then she took one too. By this time, we were really hungry, so I asked the hotel concierge to recommend a restaurant. He told us to try the Albert, which was only a 5-minute walk from the hotel. After we arrived, we saw this sign. As we read down, we stopped at this. This is that bell. The dinner there that night was excellent. The food was so good that on our way out, we made a dinner reservation for the next night, which was my birthday. We then returned to the hotel and had no problem sleeping that night. The next day, Sunday, August 7th, was my 60th birthday. We woke up at about 6:30 and I opened the cards Robin had made me before leaving home. We had decided to use our third and final travel card to purchase 2 train tickets to Windsor Castle, which is about 25 miles west of London. We had breakfast, then we took the subway to Victoria train station. We boarded the train and I indicated to Robin in sign language how I felt about turning 60. My right hand is a 6 and my left hand is a 0. The train to Windsor was a special old-fashioned steam train called the Royal Windsor Steam Express. The train ride took about an hour and we got off at the Windsor Eton train station. The walk from the train station to Windsor took about 10 minutes. We purchased tickets that included a guided tour by one of the castle docents. As we were walking to the castle entrance, I read a little bit of the history of the castle from a booklet that was part of the entrance fee. I learned that Windsor is the largest and oldest inhabited castle in the world. It has 300 fireplaces and nearly 400 clocks. As of 2005, it has been home to 39 British monarchs. Its most famous building is called the Round Tower. The bottom half of the tower was built in the year 1160 and the top half was added in the 1820s. The tower sits on a man-made hill called a motte. Our tour guide was named Francis and he was excellent. What follows are various clips of his descriptions of the castle and its history.
Now we have, give or take 1 or 2, around about 1,000 rooms in this castle. Every single room is used. Please don't ask me for a spare room, we haven't got one. Every room is used. This square building behind me here is called Magazine Tower. It's called Magazine Tower because we used to keep the gunpowder and the explosives in there in the early days. But it's now a home to somebody that works there. It's a lovely little cottage actually. But I'm pointing that out to you just to emphasise that every single room in this castle is used.
Quick note. On average, 37 airplanes take off from Heathrow Airport and fly over Windsor every day. That's the reason you will hear jet sounds in some of the video clips that follow.
This is in the history book. The round mark on the stone up there, the top stone, that was put there to denote the height of one of Oliver Cromwell's bodyguards. His name was Daniel Curtis. He was 7 feet 8 inches high. We're talking about the mid-16th century now, when people were a lot smaller than they are today. He was double the size of the average person. Daniel Curtis, and that's why they put that. But people used to come from miles and miles and miles to see this giant of a man.
In the next segment, our guide will talk about state visits. This means visits by world dignitaries to Windsor. For example,
if we have a state visit here, they'll come through the archway there in their carriage, around this quadrangle, and they'll offload here. That is the state entrance. They will go up the state stairway to where you'll be when you leave me. I'll just say 1 or 2 things about the guy on the horse here before we go. That's our King Charles II. His father, of course, was Charles I, who unfortunately lost his head. We were without a monarch for about 8 or 9 years. Oliver Cromwell was running the country. When Oliver died, it tells you all this actually in the castle exhibition. When Oliver died, he handed over the reins of the country to his son Richard. And within a year or so of Richard taking over, the monarchists took control and we got the king back. He was sheltering in France and Holland. He's dressed there in Roman clothes. He's coming back in triumph. And of course he did a lot of, it's the mid-1600s now, and he did a lot of alterations to the castle when he came back. Very traditionalists. We are. The area that we're walking in now is called Engine Court. It's called Engine Court because we used to keep the fire engine here hundreds of years ago. The fire engine was a hand-pushed pump, water pump, and it was kept in there. That was the fire station. So that's why we call this area Engine Court. Looking at tradition again, the traditional British postbox. Now this here is the moniker of King Edward VII. He was Queen Victoria's son, came on the throne in 1901. When he came on the throne, he had this postbox put here. Still in use 100 years later, and I reckon there's another couple of 100 years in that yet. We're traditionalists. Now when you get into the state apartments, you'll go into St George's Hall, the big hall. You'll see over 1,000 coats of arms in there. Now they're coats of arms of people who either have been or still are Knights of the Garter. It's our oldest form of chivalry, started in 1348. There's never been any more than 24 at one time, but since 1348 we've had almost 1,000. Now we just come down what we call Elizabeth Steps. Now this here sandstone part of the castle was built by Elizabeth I in 1583, as it says there. When she had this built, where we're standing now was a wooden structure which had been built by Henry VIII. Elizabeth made this a solid structure when she had this part of the castle built. And around about 80 or 90 years later, the fellow on the horse out there, Charles II, extended it and made it bigger. Just look at the bit that Elizabeth built there in 1583. The top part of that is the Royal Library. There are 50,000 books in there, some of them this size, some of them this size. It takes two people to lift them. Massive great books. And this is where they keep the old master prints in there, the Leonardos, etc. They're all kept stored in there in a particular temperature, etc. to keep them. They bring them out occasionally. I think you'll find some when you get into the gallery now. You'll see about 3 or 4 Leonardos in there. But they've got a total of 600 Leonardos. They're all kept in. Right, looking over the wall here, point out 1 or 2 places of interest for you. And the most interesting building, without a doubt, is the church there. That is the chapel for the famous Eton College. That's Eton College, where Prince William and Prince Harry went. The very large window is the grand reception room. And a wonderful thing about Windsor Castle, you're not coming to an old museum that was used sort of hundreds of years ago. You're coming to the monarch's home that, yes, was used hundreds of years ago, but it is still used today. If we have a state visit here, and we do get quite a few, Her Majesty the Queen will meet them in that room, and she'll escort them into St George's Hall where they have their banquet. These rooms that you're going through there are all used. They're all used. It's the wonderful thing about it.
Quick note. In 1992, they started doing some renovation work on the castle. During one of the nights, a fire accidentally broke out in Queen Victoria's private chapel. The fire quickly got out of hand and burned for 15 hours. It destroyed 115 rooms, including 9 staterooms. Luckily, many of the rooms closest to the fire had been emptied as a part of the renovation work, and the contents of those rooms was thus saved from the fire. It took 5 years to restore the fire damage. In the next clip, our guide talks about the fire.
But if you can remember, when you get into the state apartments, that grand reception room was completely gutted in the fire. It's been put back exactly as it was before the fire. It's a fantastic room, full of gold leaf. The tower on the corner there is Brunswick Tower, when the fire had finished with it, it was just a chimney. There was nothing in it at all. It burned everything in there. It took the whole corner of the castle out. I'm now going to usher you towards Queen Mary's doll's house. Let me just tell you a couple of things about it. It was built for an exhibition in London in 1924. After the exhibition had finished, they gave it to Queen Mary and she brought it here in 1925. It's not a particular palace or a house. It's well, the book says it's an average 19th century house, but I can tell you that is some average. It's built to a scale of 1/12, but everything you look at in that doll's house is in working order. Everything. There's a library down the bottom. It's not a fascia. You're looking at miniature famous books, miniature famous novels. The paintings are done by famous painters. There's a cellar down the side with kegs of sherry, bottles of wine. Everything you look at is in working order. The hot and cold water taps, everything is working order.
At this point in the tour, we walk through the Moat Garden, a lovely and well-maintained section of the castle.
This is so much fun. Yeah. August 7th, Norm's 59 and holding +1 day birthday.
Of course, we took a bunch of pictures of ourselves in the garden. Here are 4 examples of those pictures. We had wanted to see St. George's Chapel, but as luck would have it, the chapel is closed to the public every Sunday, and we came, on a Sunday. The chapel is where 10 British monarchs are buried, including, now, Queen Elizabeth. In the next clip, our guide talks about the chapel.
Very interesting structure though. It started in 1450, and there are 10 of our monarchs buried in there. Going back to the famous Henry VIII, Charles I with his head. The latest person to be buried in there, of course, was the Queen's mother. She's buried in there alongside her husband, King George VI.
The chapel, of course, was also the site of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding. This is the inside of the nave of the chapel. And this is how it looked during the wedding. This is the main entrance to the chapel, and this is where Harry and Meghan started down the steps after the ceremony. In this picture, Harry and Meghan are just leaving the chapel in a carriage. After the tour, we were free to walk around and explore on our own. We used this time for a few last-minute photos of ourselves. We left the castle grounds and started walking toward the town of Windsor, which is just outside the castle walls. We missed seeing a performance from a group of street actors who had just finished a show.
He said my manager. That's right. So my manager is about, so I was doing
All right.
By now, it was time for a late lunch, so we stopped at a little pub and ordered 2 meat and veggie Cornish pasties. Pasties usually contain beef, potato, rutabaga, and onion seasoned with salt and pepper and cooked in a short crust pastry. We loved them. After lunch, we walked around the town for a while longer and did some shopping. Just as we were getting ready to return to London, we saw these 2 statue posers. They do that in order to earn a little money. They didn't move an inch. I also had time to do some of my famous statue mugging. We made it to the train station just in time to watch our train arrive. We boarded the train at about 4 o'clock and rolled into the London Waterloo station at about 5 o'clock. After dropping off our stuff at the hotel, we returned to the Albert restaurant as planned to have a special birthday dinner. They brought us upstairs and sat us at a corner table by a window. My dinner was sensational. After we ate, I knew that I had eaten a little more than I should have, but it was worth it. Just before we left, Robin had the waiters sing me happy birthday. And they gave me a rum and coke on the house. This was one of the best birthday dinners I ever had. Before we left the Albert, we decided to do more London exploring. We returned briefly to our hotel to get Robin's camera, then started walking toward Westminster Abbey about a half-mile away. Just down the street from our hotel, we walked by the home of Scotland Yard. We hadn't noticed it before. In a few minutes, we started seeing the west face of Westminster Abbey. Then we walked around to the front of the Abbey. After that, we walked over to Parliament and Big Ben. From there we could see the London Eye. Finally, we crossed the River Thames across from Parliament. By this time, we were finally out of energy, so we walked back to our hotel and sleep. The next day, Monday, August 8th, we planned to see more of London. After breakfast, we walked back to Westminster Abbey. This time, we bought tickets to go inside. The admission included a pair of headphones through which we listened to a recorded tour of the Abbey. There were many famous people buried in the Abbey, including kings, queens, poets, composers, and writers. There were also a few actors buried there, like Laurence Olivier. We heard a cute story about Mr. Olivier. It seems that he wanted to be buried with his dog, so his wife kept his ashes until the dog had passed and been cremated. Then she had both ashes mixed together, after which the combined ashes were buried in Westminster. After seeing Westminster, we walked to our next destination, the Churchill War Rooms Museum. When we arrived there, Robin told me that she wanted to sit outside and read while I toured the museum. The war rooms were housed in a huge underground bomb-proof concrete bunker. They were used between 1939 and 1945. Churchill conducted the war from the war rooms. He also gave many radio speeches from there, including the one about the Royal Air Force's role in the Battle of Britain. Quote, Never have so many owed so much to so few." Unquote. The following are pictures of some of the rooms. The map room. Next to that was Churchill's office/bedroom. The communications room. The Chiefs of Staff conference room. And the Transatlantic telephone room from where Churchill had regular conversations with President Roosevelt. As I left the museum, I passed by this sign. And it's true. We do live in a world shaped by the events of 1945, like my birth. I finished seeing the war rooms at about lunchtime, so we decided to have lunch again at the crypt of St. Martin in the Fields Church. After lunch, we walked across the street to the National Art Gallery. It was free to enter, so we decided to splurge and rented headphones with which we could hear information about each famous painting and its artist. We really loved looking at all the famous paintings, including Da Vinci's The Virgin of the Rock. Upon leaving, Robin said that we could have spent a week going through the 50-plus rooms of the gallery. By now it was late in the afternoon, so we returned to the hotel to get ready to go see the Mary Poppins play. When she started to get dressed, Robin realized that she did not have any nylons. Without them, she would not be able to wear the short skirt she had brought on the trip. To use her terms, that caused Robin to have a tizzy fit, because now she would have to wear black jeans to the play, which she thought made her look underdressed. In any case, we hopped on the subway and rode to Leicester Square. We had a quick dinner of sandwiches and drinks, then we walked to the theater, arriving a little before 7. Everything inside the theater was set in red, including the lobby and the theater itself. Our seats were in the second row of the first balcony. The following are pictures from the play. They made some changes from the movie and added a few new songs. The production numbers were sensational. The Bert character even did a number where he danced up the wall and across the ceiling. At the end of the play, Mary flew out over the audience and then up into an opening in the ceiling of the theater. Robin and I both thought that the show was fantastic. Tuesday, August 9th was our last full day in London. That morning we had a quick breakfast and then started walking to our first destination of the day, the London Eye. Our goal was to be one of the first riders of the day. Note, the following 2 video clips are the only 2 usable ones I have from all that I shot on that last day. We bought 2 tickets and then boarded one of the gondolas. It was bigger inside than I was expecting. Since we were so early, there were only 2 other couples on the gondola with us. While it is in operation, the eye never stops. It rotates very slowly, which makes it easy to board and disembark. The ride lasts for 1 full turn of the eye, or about 30 minutes. There is a London landmark visible in this picture that Robin and I visited on this trip. Can you spot it? There it is, St. Paul's Cathedral. It is a little-known fact that Robin and I started the hand-formed heart gesture. There it is. At the top of the ride, we are 443 feet above the ground. Quite a view from up there, right? As the eye starts down, there is another landmark that Robin and I visited several times. Can you recognize it? There it is, Buckingham Palace. And on the far side of the building with a circle is the Churchill War Rooms Museum. There is very little sensation of movement, either while ascending or descending. When we finally reached the bottom, I was not a happy camper, as I would have rather ridden several more times. After riding the Eye, we took the subway to Harrods, the world's largest department store, and did some shopping. Then we went to see the Albert Memorial, and right across the street, the Royal Albert Hall. Then it was on to Piccadilly Circus. On one of the corners of Piccadilly Circus was a Virgin Megastore. Ah, the memories. From there, we walked to Leicester Square. Then we found our way to Kensington Palace. We ended at the Princess Diana Memorial in Hyde Park. Of course, Robin couldn't resist putting her feet into the water of the memorial. I don't think the water was that warm, but it was still a fun experience. Afterwards, Robin sat and air-dried her feet. Next to the memorial is the lake in Hyde Park. It is called the Serpentine. The sunset there marked the official end of our trip. The next day, we flew home.